The town had the color of old bone and the smell of burnt rope. Nothing about it invited staying. A midday haze settled like smoke over the crooked wooden buildings, where dust stirred in lazy curls beneath horse hooves and hobnail boots. Everything felt suspended in stillness, as if time had forgotten to tick forward. He stood at the edge of it all, hat low over his eyes, a shadow of a man named by no one in years. He didn't come to buy. He had come for nails and salt, maybe a coil of wire if it was cheap. The woods were calling, as they always did, and he didn't want to linger longer than the barter took. But the square was crowded, uneasy. Voices murmured low. Men leaned on posts. A boy passed him chewing a green apple, sticky juice running down his wrist. When he turned toward the commotion, the crowd peeled slightly to let him through, perhaps because of the axe strapped across his back or the way he looked through people rather than at them. They'd tied a platform together with scrap lumber and resentment. Upon it stood a tall man with a ledger and a smile too white for this place. Behind him, for others guarded the cargo, for figures lined up in shackles, heads bowed. The first was a drunk he recognized. The second, a boy barely grown. The third spat at the crowd and earned a boot to the ribs. The fourth was a woman with a sack over her head. She was the only one not chained. Her hands were free, resting at her sides like she was already somewhere else entirely. She wore a burlap dress, tore at the hem, one sleeve gone. Around her neck hung a crude wooden tag, with a single word burned into it: Lot. The auctioneer cleared his throat. No name, no history. Picked up outside Whiskey Creek, wandering without papers. Claims nothing. Speaks nothing. State don't want her. Sheriff don't want her. So we do the practical thing. He grinned like a man gutting a deer. Opening bid, $2. Silence. The crowd shifted. A cough. Someone muttered, "She ain't even worth that." He didn't speak. His fingers curled against the coins in his pocket. 2 silver pieces. One he'd meant for coffee. The other he didn't even remember keeping. 2, he said. It came out like an accident, like a sigh. The auctioneer blinked. We got 2. Do I hear 3? No one answered. Sold. The man said quickly, before the moment soured. They pushed her forward. No name, no protest, just the soft crunch of her bare feet on splintered wood. He expected resistance, some stiffening, some wild-eyed plea. Instead, she walked like someone used to the weight of her own silence. He led her away without a word. No one stopped him. No one asked why. The walk back to the cabin took 4 hours on foot through winding dirt paths and fading game trails. He didn't speak. She didn't ask. The sack stayed on her head until they passed the first river bend. There, without breaking stride, she pulled it off and let it fall behind her like shed skin. She had a face like dusk, soft-edged, half-hidden. A scar cut through her left brow, healed clean but poorly stitched. Her eyes didn't meet his. She looked at trees, clouds, the veins and fallen leaves. When they reached the cabin, a crooked thing of pine and patience, he gestured to the porch. She sat. He went inside and returned with bread and jerky, placing it between them without comment. She ate with her hands, like someone used to earning each bite with risk. That night, she slept near the hearth, curled tight as a comma. He watched the fire, listened to wind moan through the slats. Her breathing was quiet, even, like she'd never feared him, like fear had long been replaced with something colder. 3 days passed. They did not speak. He chopped wood. She mended his coat. He fetched water. She cleaned the fish. She moved with the grace of someone who used to be watched often and harshly. On the 4th night, as they sat beside a fire built more for the silence and the cold, she said her name. It landed soft but deliberate, just one word, yet it turned the air heavy. He didn't flinch, didn't blink, but the rhythm of his breath broke for half a second, like a skipped note in a song only he remembered. He looked at her now, truly looked. Same cheekbones, same cadence in her voice. A decade could alter a body, harden a voice, bury youth in muscle and scars. But names had a way of dragging the dead out of the dirt. He turned away. I knew someone by that name, he said, finally. She didn't smile, but her eyes shifted toward him for the first time. Most men did. That night, the wind howled harder. The fire burned lower. The next morning, a doe approached the tree-line and watched the cabin for nearly an hour. She never spooked, just stood there, ears twitching, eyes steady. He saw it from the window. She saw it too. Neither spoke of it. The forest, like them, kept secrets. He began to teach her the rhythm of the axe. Not the brute chop of panic, but the lull of it. The breath in, swing. The pause, swing. She was clumsy at first, then unnervingly precise. She said little, but watched everything. He wondered if she had known trees like these before, tall, old, thick with moss. He wondered what they'd taken from her. Some days he caught her humming, low tunes, carried more in her throat than her lips. Once he caught a fragment that made his chest ache, though he couldn't name the song. At night, she would trace the knots in the wood floor with her finger, as if reading something only she could see. He wondered what ghosts she entertained, wondered what she saw when she looked into the fire and did not blink. The weather turned colder. Geese flew overhead. Leaves died and let go. The days shortened and their silences deepened. But beneath the quiet, something stirred. A question neither of them asked, and both refused to answer. He found himself listening more. Not to her words, there were few, but to her presence. The soft scrape of her footsteps. The faint creak of the porch when she stood in moonlight. He wasn't sure what it meant, only that the cabin no longer felt empty. One evening, just as the last light dipped behind the pines, he asked what brought her west. She stared into the fire. Looking for someone, she said. He waited. She didn't continue. When she finally looked at him, her eyes were neither soft nor sharp, just steady. I thought he was dead, she said. Now I'm not sure. The next morning, he woke before dawn. She was already outside, watching the horizon. Someone's coming, she said. He didn't ask how she knew. He just tightened the strap on his axe. The woods were too quiet. The wind had changed. And he remembered. He'd only paid $2. But now the cost was beginning to show. The next week unspooled in fragments. Snowmelt dripping from the eaves. Sap rising the pines. Breath curling like ghosts in morning air. He worked the timberline as he always had. But now, when he swung the axe, there was a second rhythm beneath his own. She split wood beside him, sleeves rolled, arms steady. Neither spoke much. They didn't have to. Every motion became a kind of shared language, quiet, efficient, oddly intimate. She moved like someone used to carrying secrets in her bones. She didn't flinch at the creak of the forest or the echo of far-off crows. He noticed how her fingers brushed the bark before cutting, like she was asking the tree for permission. The scars on her knuckles were old, faded like memories that no longer begged for attention. One morning, he found her crouched by the creek, whispering. Not prayers, not words for him, just sounds, soft, rhythmic, like she was speaking to the water. When she noticed him watching, she stood without apology. You talk to things, he said. They answer, she replied. He didn't argue. The land had its own voice. It always had. He'd just forgotten how to listen. Later, she asked him where the rest of the world had gone. Dead, he said, or clever enough to stay gone. She didn't push. But that night, after the fire died down, she told him about her brother. No name, just a boy with fast hands and a laugh like thunder. They'd been taken from their village, burned for sheltering outlaws, or so they were told. She escaped. He didn't. She searched towns, rivers, even enemy camps. Always too late. Always just a trace, a bloodied scarf, a name scratched in plank wood. Silence. He stared into fire. He remembered a village with red clay streets and smoke rising like incense. He remembered orders barked in the rain and children shoved behind barrels. He remembered not asking names. I was there, he said. Her eyes didn't widen. She didn't stand. She just blinked, once, like she'd expected it all along. You lit the barn, she said. He nodded. You spared no one. I followed orders. You remember the boy? He hesitated. I remember one who ran. Mine didn't run. They said nothing for a long time. Wind howled outside, lacing through the cracks. The fire popped, low and bitter. She finally laid back, folding her coat beneath her head. He might still be alive, she murmured. He might, he echoed. In the days that followed, a shift took root. He saw it in her shoulders, less guarded now, but heavier, like she'd shouldered something from him, something neither of them had the right to name. He tried to work harder, split more wood, trap farther out. It was penance, emotion. She didn't praise him, didn't forgive, but she stayed. One afternoon, while dressing a snare line, he heard her shout. He dropped the coil of wire and ran. Found her by the eastern ridge, standing over a small grave. The earth was fresh, but the cross above it was old, splintered, chewed by weather. "What is it?" he asked. She pointed at the name carved faint into the wood. He read it once, then again. It wasn't her brother's name. It was his. Someone had made a grave for a man still breathing. She stepped back, arms folded. "You've been dead a long time," she said, "even if you didn't know it." He crouched by the marker. It was crude, likely carved by a child or a man shaking with guilt. Beneath the dirt, no bones waited. Just an idea. Just a warning. He looked up at her. "You bury me now?" "Not yet," she said. He didn't sleep that night. She did. Curled in his chair, rifle resting across her lap. A light snow fell outside, brushing the windows in feathered whispers. He sat by the fire and stared at his hands. Hands that had built the cabin. Split the logs, spilled the blood. He tried to imagine the boy in the burning village. Tried to decide if he would have pulled the trigger if ordered. Tried to measure the weight of every silence he'd ever kept. In the morning, she was gone. Not far, just to the river. He found her crouched by the bank, cleaning a trout she hadn't caught yesterday. "Someone's watching," she said. He didn't question her. The forest was different now. Every bird call sounded offbeat. The wind hesitated before shifting. The smell of smoke didn't come from the fire. He fetched his axe. She fetched her coat. By dusk, a man in a wide-brimmed hat rode past the tree line. Didn't approach. Didn't wave. Just stared. Then turned and rode east, slow. "That was a scout," she said. "Next come the dogs." "How many?" "Enough." He nodded. That night, she moved her things closer to the door. Tied her boots. Checked the rifle. "What do you do if they find you?" he asked. She didn't look up. "Depends who comes first, law, blood, or ghosts." "And if it's me again?" Her hands stilled. "You're not him anymore." He didn't believe it, but she said it like it was truth. "Before sleep?" She handed him something small, a carved token, worn from years of being gripped. A bird etched into its face. "Hawk, maybe." "My brother made this," she said. "Said it'd fly home if I ever got lost." He turned it over in his fingers. "You think it still can?" She looked toward the window. "If it remembers where home is." The fire burned low. Outside, the trees held their breath. They left before dawn, carrying only what they couldn't bear to lose. Rifle, axe, a length of rope, the carved bird in his pocket. The wind was sharp, scented with pine and the bite of melting frost. A silence followed them like a second shadow. No farewell. No fire left burning. Just a forest and a trail too faint for anything but memory to follow. They didn't speak for hours. The terrain grew steeper, the trees taller, older. Roots snaked across the path like sleeping limbs. He led through instinct, not direction. She watched the sky more than the ground. At midday, they passed a tree hollowed by lightning. Inside, she paused, fingers brushing the scorched interior. "Used to believe fire had its own spirit," she said, barely louder than a breath. "Not a god, just something that remembers." He didn't ask what she thought it remembered of them. They made camp near a frozen stream, hidden by a low cliff of limestone and brush. She built the fire while he set a snare. Neither asked if it was far enough. They both knew it wasn't. That night, beneath a quilt of stars barely blinking through cold haze, she turned in with her back against the rock wall. "There's a place up north," she said. "Ravine thick with mist, bones of miners buried in the shale. Locals say it's cursed. I think it just remembers too much." He studied her in the firelight. You want to go there? I think someone I'm looking for went there to disappear. You think your brother's still alive? She paused. I think he became something else. A man like you. A name buried under ash. He looked at the fire. Then maybe he's closer than you think. She didn't smile, but something in her face loosened. At dawn, the snare held a rabbit. She cleaned it quick and quiet, hands practiced, eyes distant. He boiled coffee black and bitter, handed her a tin cup. She drank it without a word. By midday, they crested a ridge and saw the old mining road, mostly rockslide now, but enough path left to follow. She pointed toward the trees. Ravines down that way. There's a cabin near the edge. Used to belong to a trapper. Now belongs to no one. They descended slow. The earth softened underfoot, growing wetter, colder. Trees grew closer together, bark bruised with moss. Sound didn't carry well here. Birdsong died quick. Footsteps vanished. It was a place that wanted forgetting. The cabin waited at the edge of the drop, half-rotted and slouched like an old drunk. Smoke no longer rose from its chimney. The door hung crooked on one hinge. But it wasn't empty. The axe was still leaning on the wall. The trap line had been cut. The ashes in the hearth were warm. He turned fast. She already had the rifle lifted. A man stepped from the trees, one hand raised. Tall, lean, mouth stitched with old scars. He looked at the lumberjack, then at her. Well, he said, didn't expect to see you two together. She didn't lower the rifle. Put your gun down. He didn't. Just smiled slow. I knew your brother, he said to her. Knew him better than you did. She moved closer, steps measured. You gave him up. He gave himself up. Thought he'd buy time. Was wrong. The lumberjack stepped between them. You the one followed us? The man nodded. Saw her on that auction block. Didn't bid. Figured she was either bait or a ghost. What do you want? The man tilted his head. Not sure. Maybe a memory. Maybe mercy. You won't find either here. The man shifted his weight, hand hovering near his belt. I heard what you did, he said, voice low, to her village. Thought I'd come see if hell grew a conscience. No one moved. The wind picked up, whistling between the trees. Then he drew. The lumberjack moved first. Axe in hand, he deflected the first shot. Wood splintered. Bark exploded nearby. The woman dropped to one knee, fired once, twice. The second bullet hit the man's thigh. He staggered, cursed, still aiming. She rose, walked forward, muzzle steady. He laughed, bleeding into the dirt. Took you long enough. You knew who I was, she said. Knew you'd come. Vengeance runs in the blood. She lowered the rifle. He blinked in disbelief. You're not going to finish it? He spat. She stepped back. No. The man snarled. He'll always be what he was. You think you change him? You think chopping trees and playing House of Races afire? She looked at the lumberjack, then at the wound in the man's leg, still pulsing dark red. I didn't change him, she said. He chose to change. She turned away. The man tried to raise his gun again. This time, the lumberjack swung the axe. The weapon fell from his hand. So did he? Not dead, but broken. They left him there, bleeding but breathing, to reckon with the cold and the silence. By dusk, they reached the ravine. The mist hung low, curling around stones like hands reaching from the underworld. She stood at the edge and looked down. I don't know if I want to find him anymore, she said. He didn't answer. She turned toward him, something uncertain in her eyes. But I think I want to keep going. The light faded. The mist thickened. Behind them, the wind carried no sound of pursuit. But they both knew this wasn't over. Something else was coming. The trail back to the cabin was colder than when they'd left it. Snow crept along the edges of the path, thin but certain, like the season had made up its mind. Crows had returned to the pines, quiet ones, watching. The wind moved with purpose now, sharp and quick, no longer wandering. He felt in his ribs like an old bruise waking up. When they reached the clearing, the smoke hit him first. Not wood smoke. Not the soft kind that curled from the chimney after a slow morning fire. This was darker, bitter, something scorched. He dropped the axe and ran the last stretch. The cabin was still standing, but someone had been inside. The door hung open. The woodpile was scattered. Boot tracks pressed into the frost like decorations. She stepped in beside him, eyes moving fast. "Not locals," she said. "Horses. At least 3. Could be bounty, could be worse." He checked the hearth, ashes warm. Someone had lit a fire no more than an hour ago. The food stores had been picked through, but not taken. This wasn't theft. It was a warning. "They'll come back," she said. "They want us to know that." He nodded once, jaw tight. "Then we stay ready." By nightfall, the cabin was fortified. Windows nailed with split timber, a second lock fastened to the cellar door. He poured lamp oil into glass bottles, stuffed rags for fire. She lined her bullets on the table like chess pieces. It wasn't panic that filled the room. It was certainty. They had run out of places to run. As the fire crackled, he watched her braid her hair back, slow and calm. Her fingers didn't tremble. She looked at him over the flames. "You still carrying that bird?" He reached into his coat and pulled it free. The carving had worn smooth from days in his pocket. She took it and turned it over in her palm. "Funny," she said. "When we were little, my brother said it would bring me home. Now I don't even know where that is." He stared at the firelight reflected in her eyes. Home doesn't have to be what it was. She slid the bird back into his hand and let her fingers linger a moment too long. "I know," she said. The knock came near midnight. Not a knock, really. Just a thud of a boot against wood, followed by a voice. "Thought I might find you here, Lumberjack." He rose slow, hands loose at his sides. She moved to the shadows, rifle raised. The voice outside was clear, calm, dangerous. "You took something, and the world doesn't forget. $2 don't buy a soul." She was promised to someone else. He stepped to the door, but didn't open it. "She ain't property." The voice laughed. "Then she's a witness. And that's worse." A pause. "I got 6 men with me, all riding hungry. You can come out and make this quiet." "She's not going anywhere," he said. A beat, then the hiss of fire. Something hurled, glass shattering. Flames bloomed at the cabin's edge. He threw open the door, tossed snow on the flames. She fired once. Someone cried out. Then bullets hit the walls like hail. He ducked, grabbed the axe, and kicked over the table for cover. They moved without thinking, a rhythm carved from survival. She covered the windows. He slipped out the back, circled wide. In the moonlight, he could make out 3 horses tied off, riders crouched in the trees. He crept closer, boots muffled by snow. He struck the first man clean, axe through collarbone. The second turned too late. He tackled him, fists red, throat tight. Gunshots echoed behind him. He heard her shout something, fierce and sharp. Back at the cabin, another Molotov hit the wall. She hurled it back before it caught. A scream lit the air. Then silence. He staggered through the trees, blood warm on his arm. 2 more men lay in the clearing. The others were gone, or crawling off to die quieter. She met him at the door, breath white in the cold. "You're hit," she said. He shook his head. "You?" "No." He leaned against the doorway. The fire was out. The walls stood, barely, but they were still breathing. "I thought we were done running," he said. "We are," she replied. Inside, the cabin smelled like smoke and copper. The table was splintered, the windows shattered. But the bird carving still sat on the mantel untouched. He dropped to the floor, exhausted. She sat beside him, thigh against his, warm chair without need for words. After a long silence, he spoke. "I was a monster once. I know. I didn't expect to live long enough to regret it." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "I didn't expect to live long enough to forgive." His eyes stung, but not from smoke. They slept a little before dawn, rifles across their chests. The sun rose slow over the blood-soaked snow, turning it gold. They buried the dead beneath the frost line. No markers. The wind scattered what names might have been spoken. Weeks passed. The cabin rebuilt piece by piece. Her laugh returned, quiet, uncertain at first, then sure. He caught himself smiling more than he used to, even when no one was looking. One night, as the first spring rain tapped the roof, she looked up from the fire. "You never asked my brother's name." He didn't move. "You sure you want to tell me?" he asked. She smiled, the kind that held sorrow and peace in equal weight. "I think I already did." She reached for his hand, closed his fingers around the bird. He squeezed once, not to hold it, but to let it go,